On our phones right now, I am most pleased to have an extraordinary individual who has done extraordinary work for the state of Israel. Here is the Consul General of the state of New York in New York, Ido Aharoni. Ido, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Ido, first of all, can you simply give us an update? Obviously in Israel, we're into Shabbat already. What's going on in the last 24 hours? Where do you feel things stand in Israel's attempt to stop Hamas rocket fire into Israel?
Well, the ground operation started yesterday. We have 40,000 troops on the ground. The cabinet authorized another 8,000 troops to be recruited. The operation is progressing according to the plan. The main goal right now, as it stands, is to destroy the wide and tight network of Hamas tunnels. Some of them are penetration tunnels that go underground. Hamas basically moved its entire terrorist apparatus under the ground, in some cases 60 feet under the ground. They used the tunnels not only to penetrate Israeli territory, but also to hide their weapons and ammunition. They were able to amass 12,000 rockets. And so the purpose of the operation is to deprive them of that operational capability.
Okay, Ido, there are those who say, there are those who, first of all, are rooting Israel on. The opinion polls we seem to be getting out of Israel indicates enormous support within the Israeli public for this operation. There are those, however, who say continually, as valid, as noble as Israel's cause is, it is virtually impossible to ever win enough of a victory in Gaza to ever stop Hamas from this rocket barrage. What's your sense?
Well, the question that we ask ourselves day in and day out is, what do you do with an enemy that is not interested in compromise, with an enemy that is committed to your destruction? That's a very, very difficult question to answer, especially when you have the moral high ground, as we do in this case. We are not targeting deliberately civilians. The enemy does. We are not provoking our neighbors into a military confrontation. Our enemy does. We're not telling our people we invested billions of dollars, not only in developing the Iron Dome system, which helps us to intercept missiles midair, but we also built shelters. We built sheltered playgrounds for toddlers and all over the country. The Palestinians and Hamas have done nothing to protect their own people. Even former President Clinton just said the other day that this has been the strategy for many years, to perpetuate the suffering of their own people because of this ill-conceived notion that Israel is hurt by it.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's been a subtle shift in the way in which the American media is presenting this entire conflict. For a while, it virtually ignored it. I saw you on MSNBC on Morning Joe one morning, where basically you were surrounded by people who had one question for you: how is Israel going to handle Palestinian civilian casualties? And, that seems now to be the focus of many of the stories that we see in the New York Times, in the print media, on television. And I was wondering how you, as an Israeli, feel when the story seems to be slanted now against Israel because Israel isn't suffering enough death. And as a result, Israel is the powerful bad guy, and the Palestinians who started this, who could end it anytime Hamas wants to. They can end this entire episode by stopping firing rockets, but it's not the way the story is told. What's your reaction to all this?
Well, as I said before, Hamas is a deadly organization. The media is asking questions about casualties because maybe there's an expectation that we will apologize for the fact that we not only possess the military might, but also that have the technology to protect ourselves. Well, the fact is that 1,500 rockets that were launched against Israel from Gaza, if not for the Iron Dome, if not for the intense emergency preparation exercises before this operation, if not for all of this preparation, the devastation could have been beyond belief and beyond imagination. And therefore, it is not only our right to defend ourselves, as government, I tell you, it is our duty,
of course,
to protect our citizens. No other government would have acted differently, and no other person would have acted differently if they were in the same situation as we find ourselves today.
Of course. I want to ask you about one upsetting story that appeared today in the New York Times on the op-ed page. It was written by Nathan Thrall. It begins, "How the West Chose War in Gaza." And the piece basically outlines how oppressive Israel is to the Gazan situation. It is limiting electricity to 8 hours a day. This is before the barrage began. This was the old status quo, according to the article. Israel was limiting Gaza to 8 hours of electricity a day. The water was undrinkable. The sewage was a terrible situation. The state of Israel was blocking money to pay people in Gaza to perform services for the country. And therefore, the article ends, "The current escalation in Gaza is a direct result of the choice by Israel and the West to obstruct the implementation of the April 2014 Palestinian Reconciliation Agreement. The road out of the crisis is a reversal of that policy." To the extent to which you can, if you were with Nathan right now, how would you answer his op-ed piece?
Well, there are two answers to this. The first is to go back and read books about the military history of the world. And I can assure you that you will not find in the history of military an army that is aiding its own enemy in times of war, that is averting some of its own military plans and operations because of the fear to hurt innocent civilians. We are at war with Hamas. Hamas has a charter. In it, they call for the obliteration of the state of Israel. Mm-hmm. This is not a regular situation. So that's the first answer. The second, of course, is, check the facts. The facts do not support the argument that you just mentioned. Here is the sequence of events that happened. Hamas abducted 3 innocent Israeli teenagers and then brutally murdered them. When we started searching for them, arresting people that had information about this case, they started firing rockets. When Egypt put on the table a proposal for a ceasefire, Israel immediately said no. Yes, they said no. When the UN proposed a window of 5 hours for humanitarian ceasefire, they kept on firing rockets. So this is the sequence of events. These are the facts. Now, some people do not wish to be confused by the facts, and that's okay. But they need to get the facts right before they write off that piece.
I imagine it is so frustrating for you, who only wants there to be peace in the Middle East and peace between Israeli and Palestinians, to constantly have to answer these kind of questions and to, pick up the New York Times and see a front page story and a big photograph of an Israeli youth, a Palestinian youth who was caught in a bomb from Israel and is dead on the beach. And our hearts go out to the family that lost this child. And I know every Israeli also is so sorry any Palestinian civilian dies. At the same time, Israel didn't start this. It's not Israel's fault. And you, the Consul General in Israel, have to deal with this every day. So I guess my last question for you is, for you personally, Ido, and I've been in your presence so many times, you're an extraordinary human being, but I want to understand what it feels in your heart when you see the way in which the story is spun, and what is it that you really wish all of America who's watching you now on Shalom TV, what do you want us to know?
Well, I want people to know that I'm extremely grateful and appreciative of all the displays of support that I received since the operation began. In fact, since the 3 boys were abducted. I can tell you that we are in my office. We're busy day in and day out, attending pro-Israel rallies, attending events, making ourselves available to the media. I'm overwhelmed by the level and the scope of the support for Israel in America, and especially in New York, which is the greatest city in the world.
You know, Ido, you are doing unbelievably wonderful work, not only for the state of Israel, but for the Jewish people. You've always been very kind to me. I appreciate your finding a few moments for us today. We must sit together soon and discuss this at greater length. But I thank you very much.
I'd love to come to your studio.
Thank you.
Today has been a crazy day.
I look forward to it. Best to you and
to
all your family. Thank you, Ido.